Hi there. In my last two videos, I demonstrated how we could add some code to the individual workbook such that all of the worksheets are protected when the workbook is closed. There are a couple of disadvantages to this approach. One is that we need to enable macros in the workbooks, and we might not want to do this because it makes it more difficult to distribute the workbook. And another reason is we might not want to have to copy and paste code into each and every workbook we create. So what we're going to do instead in this video is we're going to create a personal macro workbook and put our code into that. And that way, with the personal macro workbook, it stays on our machine, but we can use that code to manipulate all of the workbooks we open without putting code into those workbooks. So to start this, we need to have a personal macro workbook. And if you don't have one created already, one of the easiest way to do it is to start by going to the Developer tab. If you don't have the Developer tab, you'll have to click Customize the ribbon and add the check mark for the developer part of the ribbon. Once you have that, you can go to Macros and say Record Macro. And here, you have to make sure that it says Store Macro in Personal Macro Workbook. I'll just hit OK. I'll just type something, doesn't really matter. And I'm going to go and stop the recording by pressing the stop down here. Now, if I hit Alt F11, we can see that we now have a book 1. This is the workbook I'm working in, but we now also have a personal macro workbook. I'll go down here and look, this is the module we just created. We don't really need that, so I'm just going to go ahead and remove that straight away. One of the things about the personal macro workbook is that each and every time I open a new workbook, it's going to also open the personal macro workbook. So we can utilize this by putting our code in here. So what I'm going to do is when the personal macro workbook opens, so go workbook, open, and I want to do something here. So before doing that, I'm going to have a public variable, public my Excel app as excel.application. Now, I want to be able to subscribe to events within this. So I'll say with events. That means that this object is going to show the events we can attach to it. But I haven't set the object yet. I've just declared it. So when the personal macro workbook's open, I'm going to set a reference to it by doing it like this, my Excel app equal this workbook dot application. Now, I'm going to go up here and select my Excel app, and I'm going to select workbook before close. Let me just delete this part. So, what I can see here is that each time this application closes a workbook, I can write code. So, I'm going to do pretty much the same as I did in the other sheets. Let me just copy and paste that code in. Okay, so I've pasted in the code we made in the earlier sessions. And there's one thing I need to change because I don't want it to work on this workbook because this workbook is my personal macro workbook, but I want it to work on the workbook object that the code is passing in. So I'll use that instead. So now, each time my application opens, it's going to activate this reference, and each time this reference has a workbook that is closing, it's going to run the code. So let's try to see how that works in practice. I'm just going to close down. I'm going to reopen Excel, blank workbook. Let's just take a look. I hit Alt F11 again, and we can see we still have our personal macro workbook. The code is still here. Let's just do something, and I'll close down. See, it comes up, prompts me if I want to protect worksheets. I'll select yes. I'll save my changes, and I'll open it up again. And let's try to see if it's actually protected. Yep, it's protected. So with this personal macro workbook, we can make sure that all of our worksheets are automatically protected without having to embed code into each individual workbook. In my next video, I am going to demonstrate how we can add a small icon to the sheet name whenever it's protected, and how we can make some code to toggle the display of this icon. So don't forget to subscribe so you'll be notified when the next video becomes available. Thank you.